because I stuck up for people's mental health, these were freelancers that, if you didn't work that day, you wouldn't be paid for it. And I kind of stuck up, and that was I think personally, it was used against me of like, oh no, they wanted me to be a yes man, and I wasn't.
Welcome to the Silent Epidemic by Omniotherapy. I'm your host, Hatice Mehmet-Quirk, and as always, we're talking about things nobody else is. Together with our incredible guests, we're diving deep into mental health challenges that are sweeping the nation and breaking them down piece by piece. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Lee Cocker, a veteran of the gaming industry with over 20 years of experience working with Sega, Nintendo, and the International Olympic Committee, among others. Lee, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So first things first, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. And for our listeners, could you give us a little bit of a background on your work in the games industry?
So I was executive producer for the very successful Mario and Sonic franchise. I worked on the game for 20 years, from the initial game, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Beijing, all the way through to Tokyo 2020. Went on to work at the BBC, worked on several mobile games for Doctor Who, some projects for Top Gear, and then went on last year did a lot of freelance work for a lot of emerging technology companies and did a lot of immersive experiences, what you call social gaming. And worked on a game for Paw Patrol and Ghostbusters. And then obviously I've taken a break from the games industry, which obviously we'll talk about today.
All right. That's quite impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah, quite a CV you've got there. Especially like some household names, big projects.
Yep.
The thing that came to my mind there was that's a long time to be involved within an industry.
Yeah.
Especially with an industry that has changed so much in terms of what gaming was 20 years ago isn't what gaming is now.
Yep.
And that must have been quite difficult to navigate within itself.
Yeah, because obviously there's always new emerging technologies, the evolution of new consoles, you have to keep up to date with what the technology is, and you're always learning. And obviously the popularity of genre in games of like currently now a lot of people are playing like battle royale games such as Fortnite. So it's it's the evolution of the technology as well as the evolution of the popularity of games as well.
That evolution and those changes, and you said the learning, because there's two, as you said, there's two sides to it. It's not just what people are playing and how they're playing them. It's the changes to the actual equipment as well.
Yeah.
Did you do that learning yourself, or does it come with the job? Or
it comes with a job of like, okay, there's a new console out. Usually you get what you call development kits,
right?
And you have the development kit in your office, and then you learn how it all works and everything, and you get like a breakdown of the what the requirements are. And then obviously you work with the development teams of like, this is the new console, and then they get the the document of how it all works, and then they build the games around that.
I mean, you've got to forgive me because I'm not the most tech savvy person in the world, so all of that goes like right over my head. But that must be quite pressuring.
Oh yeah, it's incredibly pressure. You are under a lot of pressure, because you need to learn it and brush up with it quite quickly, and but with me I always ask questions, but I've always been good with technology, and I have I can pick up something quite quick. So me personally, it is stressful, but I've kind of learned to have a bit more faith in myself and my abilities, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So yourself that actually technology, that's your thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You can always navigate and find your way through it.
Yeah, since I was a little boy, I was always good with computers, and and I was very lucky that my parents encouraged it. And I had a Amstrad CPC 464, if anybody remembers that, and I learnt to code on it. And then when I was at school, we had a history game that we all had to play, and I let's say, broke into the game and reverse engineered it.
Wow.
And like cheated in this game, which wasn't actually looked upon badly. It was encouraged. It's like, oh, he has a very unique skill set, and it was very encouraged from an early age. So I was very, very lucky.
And then you mentioned there about like your parents encouraging it, because it's a big thing these days, isn't it? Gaming. I said this to you off camera earlier. This whole the way people, like children of today, socialize is done via gaming. And it comes under a lot of scrutiny in that, you know, how are they going to develop socially if they're just doing everything they're doing through a screen? But then from your perspective, it actually set you up to have a really good career ahead of you because you were encouraged to engage in that skill set, and you've just grown and developed from there.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, I was very lucky. But going back to your point about, you know, people's thoughts on video games. So when we worked with the IOC and we first talked about doing Mario and Sonic, their concerns were it's just going to be kids playing in front of the screens. What we were very lucky with was it was the Wii, so it was physical, active gameplay. So it was, and I've mentioned this before. It was a perfect storm. It was the two of the biggest video game characters, Sonic and Mario, on a new console machine, which, you know, went back into the living room. A lot of console machines, people were playing up in their bedroom, and the Wii with like Wii Sports and stuff like that. It came back into the living room, and we were very lucky. As I said, it was a perfect storm of Sonic, Mario, Olympics, Wii, and it encouraged it. And the IOC's perception, the International Olympic Committee perception of gaming kind of changed. It was like they saw the benefits of, hey, it's physical gameplay. So it wasn't people, you know, in their bedrooms tapping buttons and stuff and being unsocial. It was social gaming.
So it changed the view or the perspective of it. But obviously that was quite some years ago.
Yeah.
So where are we at now in terms of those views?
Yeah, I think like last year, it was a bit of a bloodbath for people working in the games industry. There was a lot of layoffs. This is due to, like, during COVID, a lot of people were playing gaming. So a lot of companies got a lot of investment thinking, hey, everyone's playing games now. And then after COVID, it was like people then went back to their daily routines and doing other stuff. And, you know, with gaming, you know, it's competing with streaming, movies, you know, cinema, a lot of streaming services. You're competing for screen time. That's what it is. There's, you know, we all look at a screen at a certain point in our life, and what percentage of the screen time is gaming. So yeah, last year there was a lot of layoffs. There was a lot of mergers. A lot of companies buying smaller companies. The cost of gaming, it's like over movie budgets now to make a really decent game. And as I said, the genre of people playing games at the moment, you know, the big two at the moment are Fortnite and Roblox. So people aren't creating their own games, they're creating digital content in them games. So they're creating elements of gaming in these existing games. So they're not creating new games, they're building in, because everyone's going to these games, so they're trying to be part of it. You know, the big word at the moment is metaverse. Metaverse, NFTs, metaverse, you know, so there's this argument that people are building these metaverses and competing to try and get people into these metaverses and building content for that. But so last year was a big struggle for the industry, and I think that's a misconception of that, because everyone's playing games. It should be going, you know, it should be going really well, and you should be earning loads of money. And it was the complete opposite. It was, you know, and obviously with more layoffs, when you're looking for a job, you're competing against more and more people because of the layoffs.
And then comes into play that thought of, oh my God, you know, you work with games, and how exciting and what a wonderful industry to be in, and you're so lucky. You know, you're not really doing a job, you're doing something that you love.
Just to jump in, like all my friends would always joke with me, oh, you just sit there and play games for a little. Part of that was true, but you know, there was, you know, I had to look at Excel documents. I had to there was a story mode. I had to read all the lines in the story mode. I worked with a lot of Japanese developers, so I had to make the game less. So things like when you're developing the game in Japan, they use a green circle as a positive.
Right.
And outside of Japan, people don't understand what a green circle is. So me going through that, I have to, oh no, it's a green tick. Outside of Japan, it's a green tick. And getting certain changes within a game so it has a worldwide appeal and people can understand it. So that was, I'm not just sitting there playing games. I'm sorting out, as trivial as that problem could be, it's still an issue I need to address. But also, I had to deal with approvals and working with the International Olympic Committees, like, making sure the rings are the right colour, making sure that all the artwork's correct, working with their top sponsors. So some of their top sponsors is like Visa and Coke. So you've kind of got to work with them and tell them what you're planning to do in the games. So it's, it's not just me going, hey, what's the new game? And then me playing it. There's a lot of hard work in it. And my friends saw that, I got to travel the world. I got to go to Japan. I got to go to Rio, Spain, Switzerland. In other words, every time, I'd update my Facebook or my LinkedIn or everything, everyone's like, oh, you're just swanning around the world playing games. And it's like, no, I'm working really, really hard. I've got to stand in front of an audience of, 200 IOC members playing, what was I doing? Ice skating, and like there's me, swinging a Wii remote and like, being quite vulnerable on stage to present and show the IOC, this is the game that we're working on. So there's an element of that as well, of presenting what we're doing and working with Sega, Nintendo and the International Olympic Committee.
And when we think of games, like from the layman's perspective as such, you don't think of any of that, do you?
No.
You're only seeing that, oh my God, and as your friends would say, wow, like you get to play games all day. But actually, from what you're describing there, that's a lot of pressure, even standing up in front of 200 people to play the game. And you mentioned vulnerability there, or making sure that you've got dealing with big corporations and making sure that their sponsorship is covered properly within these games, and the Excel spreadsheets and the different logistics for different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
That's all sounds like a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it is, and it is that misconception of like, it must be really easy for you, and it wasn't, and there was a lot of problem solving. Like you said with the sponsors, for example, Visa wanted to put their logo in the mobile game to say that they were the preferred payment partner, and obviously with any mobile, you have to go through whatever credit card that you've got on your phone and Google and Apple, it's that payment system. And it was like, you can't do that. And obviously telling Visa you can't do that, and the IOC you can't do that. Well, we need the logo in there. And it was actually me that came up with the solution of, we can put it in the credits. So in the credits of the mobile game, if you click on credits, at the end, it would then say, preferred method of payment, Visa. And it was like, and that solved that problem. But it's like, my friends are like, oh, no, come work with me for a day. And, it was, and there's an element, I always joke with a lot of people, I say, if you work in a pizza place, you don't go home and eat pizza. It was very similar to me, kind of, because of the work that I was doing, I was playing games less because it was like, it felt like work. And again, it's one of the reasons I've taken a break now, because it was like, I was never, a lot of my friends were like, oh, do you want to go online? Do you want to socialize? Do you want to meet up? I was part of a Nintendo gaming group that we would meet up, and I haven't been for a while because it was like, it was work, and so me taking a break is like me taking a break outside the industry, and obviously waiting for it to kind of settle down, and all the issues that are currently going on at the moment with the company's mergers and the layoffs and stuff. So I'm kind of seeing what happens like after it's kind of settled down, if it even settles down, which is the question.
Because I was just about to ask, that's the next layer. I mean, you're talking about the intricacies of the job, and let's call a spade a spade. Every job has the intricacies, regardless of whether you get that. Oh, well, you're playing games all day. We've all got challenges that we need to overcome within our work, but then the pressure of mergers and layoffs and that uncertainty of, what am I going to be doing for work, or can I find work? And the fact that games aren't being made as much as they were, and people are making segments of games to sort of plug into existing games. that must be a massive challenge to navigate, especially on your mental health.
Yeah, and last year, and I've told a lot of people this, last year was a real struggle for me because it was, and we talked about the technology, it was, making sure my CV had certain key words of software that people were using in terms of project management skills, project management software, making sure I was clued up on that. So watching YouTube videos and making sure that I had the skill set that if I came to an interview, what would be the questions to ask and give examples of me using that software for that solution. But last year, no, it was a big struggle because I'd finished at the BBC and I was looking at moving into newer technologies. I was doing there was a lot more money in freelance, and I thought, I'll take that route. And I personally think it was a bad decision because I was going from company to company. And a lot of the times, the things that I struggled with was there was always the dangling of the carrot of, oh, it'll be a permanent position, do these 3 months, get this project over the line, make sure it gets delivered, manage this team and everything. And, oh, there may be a position of you be permanent. And a lot of the times there was no permanent position. It was just, it was a goal to get the game over the line and deliver. And last year was a real struggle because, certain companies, I'm not going to name them, they thought they were doing it in reverse. They were going by what the marketing was and then going, oh, we can create a game in like 2 months. And it's like, you can't do that. You can't, and obviously we talk about crunch and everything, but they were pushing, they were hiring a lot of freelancers and they were pushing them, and they were what we called in the industry crunch, where you're pushing freelancers to work overtime. And obviously I was managing a team and I felt that the team was, they were burning out and worrying about people's mental health of like, oh, they've gone sick today or whatever. And I was checking in on them and stuff like that. And it was incredibly important to me. And we had managers meetings and I said, this is an unrealistic goal of trying to deliver this game in 2 months, or this project in 2 months. This is unrealistic. And they're like, but the marketing, I was like, it shouldn't be led by the marketing. It should be led from the development part. And then agreed the timelines were basically in reverse. And it was a real struggle. And because I stuck up for people's mental health, these were freelancers that, if you didn't work that day, you wouldn't be paid for it. And I kind of stuck up, and that was I think personally, it was used against me of like, oh no, they wanted me to be a yes man, and I wasn't. And it was like, oh, is that, am I being considered for the full-time position? Oh no, we've gone with someone else. And it was like, so basically you've used me for these 3 months or 4 months to like get the project over the line. And I delivered on all my projects on time, under budget. Myself ended up doing, on one of the projects, it had to have German translations. And in the end, I ended up hired a freelancer to do all the German translations, to do all the audio recordings. I got 2 people to do that for me and ended up getting it all done and dusted and delivered dead on time for a gaming, for the release in Germany. But I did feel that, it was how they were treating the staff and me sticking up for them went against me. Sorry.
Because even the use of the word crunch, at first I thought, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But it all sounds quite manipulative.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a big, massive corporation. I'm going to take on a whole load of freelancers that if they don't come into work that day, they're not getting paid, number one. I'm going to put ridiculous timescales on them to get these jobs done based on what the marketing team is telling me, not what actually how long it takes to develop a game and work on it, etc., etc. And then I'm going to dangle that carrot in front of all of these freelancers with the idea of, oh, well, let's work on this project. And once we've worked on this project, then we'll talk about a permanent position. So almost you've got a group of people working on a project to be completed with an almost unachievable timeline. And it's just that crunch of let's just keep pushing these people down so that we can get out of them what we want to get out of them. And then when it comes to offering them a full-time position, oh no, sorry, you don't seem like the right fit.
Yeah, and I won't say which company it was, but basically everything I predicted in the meeting of like, well, this is going to cause problems further down the line. And they were like, well, if we don't deliver, it's going to cause this, this and this. And it was almost like the company will fall apart. And I was like, well, this is pure mismanagement.
Yeah.
But it was incredibly important for me. And, you know, if I'd had to go back, I'd still do it again of sticking up for my staff. I wouldn't be a yes man. But with that company, there was, you know, it was very hard. There was a lot of layoffs after that. After I left as well, there was a lot of layoffs. But because there was key people in that team, during that time I was looking for a job, but in the end I ended up helping about 3 or 4 people get jobs with other companies that I worked for. And that was incredibly important to me as well. Yeah. And my mum joked, it was like, you know, you should be focusing on getting a job for yourself. And I was like, no, you know, I can help these people out. And that was incredibly important to me. And, you know, I was sharing their CVs. I was contacting these people and was like, oh, so-and-so, they're in this field. They're very, very good. So about 3 or 4 people from that company ended up working for the people that I worked after that. Yeah. But yeah, last year was a massive, massive struggle for me mental health-wise as well. And to the point where my mental health was affecting my health, that I ended up with shingles. Oh, wow. And I was like, wow. I was like, and that was the first, I was like, what's shingles? And it was like, I phoned the GP up and I said, I've got this rash, and I had to send the picture and everything. And they said, oh, it's shingles. And I was like, and they said, have you been under a lot of pressure recently? And I was like, yeah, I was like, you know, going from job to job. And they were like, oh yeah, that would be it. And I was like, oh. Wow. So, and then after that, I made a big decision to look at company policy in terms of mental health, wellness health, what's their crunch policy. And a lot of, one out of probably 5 companies, one company said we have a no crunch policy. But a lot of the others, they kind of diverted or walked around it and weren't very honest with what they were offering in terms of mental health and well-being and their crunch policy. So that was part of the decision why I've taken a step back.
Right. Because that's what I was going to say. It's crazy that in this day and age, and obviously this is what this whole podcast is all about, right? It's looking at the fact that there's so much awareness about the importance of looking after your mental health, that you're having your work-life balance. And then you've got companies, big corporations that, let's call a spade a spade. They've got funds, and you know they've got the backing behind them to put things in place to avoid abusing members of staff in that way, because it does sound quite abusive.
Yeah, it's manipulative, I think is the word, and it's like the dangling of the carrot of, oh, it's a permanent position. The crunch of, obviously, and with everyone, you're trying to prove yourself, so you're working the extra hours to get that permanent position. And it's like, oh, if I do this, I'll get the permanent position. And you kind of, I was tying myself up in knots last year, and of like, oh, if I do this extra, if I volunteer for this or whatever, or if, you know, and kept on overselling myself of saying, oh, I delivered this, I got it done on time. And then you kind of feel a bit more, you know, like, I want a pat on the head kind of thing. Does that make sense? So yeah, it was a big struggle last year of, you know, it felt like, and being a freelancer, my analogy when I've told like friends and stuff, it's like you're swinging on a vine and you're hoping that there's another vine there to swing on. And again, with all the layout, there wasn't a lot of permanent positions because of deadlines, because of budgets, because of mergers. People were looking at just freelancers and not looking at permanent positions, especially with there was like 3 or 4 new tech companies that I worked for last year that were looking at funding and, you know, getting the projects in and getting the people in, and then sometimes offering people a permanent position. But a lot of the time it was just freelance.
The other thing that came to my mind is how lucky your team were, really, that you wasn't that yes person that they kind of expected you to be, because in a way you've kind of set the tone to that team to say, hold on a minute, we don't have to adhere to all of these rigid guidelines or deadlines that are almost unachievable. And then obviously helping out people to sort of move to companies with better policies in place. but you almost planted the seed for that team that actually wherever you go, all right, yes, for you, it didn't work out that well in the end in terms of, you're saying that because you wasn't that yes person, you feel like that's why there wasn't that permanent position. But until people make changes and sort of put up the resistance, the industries won't change, will they? Because if people just keep doing it, well, the industries are going to keep expecting and putting those ridiculous pressures on people with no thought or regard for their mental health. I mean, you're saying you're getting shingles as a result of being under so much stress and pressure.
Yeah, I was very lucky, just to follow up on that. So one of the people that I managed knew a company, knew that I was finishing up with that company, obviously, because I'd kind of fought for everyone's corner. And because I fought for their corner, he said, I know so-and-so. And I had an interview, and that was the company that I then went on to. I would have stayed there, but they wanted me to move to a different place, and I couldn't do it. And I would have stayed there, but they were a very good team, and they treated me very well. And like I said, I would have stayed there. And but yeah, again, it was a freelance position, but it was like, if you move here, you can have the job. And they wanted a permanent person in the office, and I couldn't do that. So, but because of me managing this person, so, I'd done a good job. He put in a good word for me, and then I went to another company. So yeah, but the thing that happened to me afterwards was I got a lot of messages from the team to say, thank you, it was a pleasure working with you. Really enjoyed it. One of the things that I introduced, which I still do now, was, so you have what we call stand up in the morning, and basically you have everyone in your team and they all tell you what they're working on, and usually you work from like a project management software to say, what you're working on, what you're doing today, and you'd have a stand up. And with the stand up, a lot of the people weren't communicating with each other, or it was very obviously some majority of these people were working from home, and they weren't really talking to each other. They were very, their personalities weren't coming across. And I was like, when it was my first stand-up, I said, right, and this was just off the cuff, I didn't plan it or anything. I said, right, I'm going to tell you a joke. I said, I'm going to tell you a joke about luggage. And you can tell me if it's funny or not. I said, but I'm going to nominate one of you tomorrow to tell me a joke about luggage. And I said, the theme over this period, over this deadline will be luggage. And then the next timeline, it will be a joke about crisps or food or animals or something. Or so I told this joke, and I said, right, I'm going to nominate so-and-so. You're going to tell me a joke tomorrow. And then the following day, he told a joke. And then his personality started coming out. And I said, right, you've got to nominate someone. He nominated another member of the team. And in the end, it was such a small thing, made the complete difference of people were enjoying, and they were attending stand-up. They had their cameras on because you want to see people's reactions. And that little change, it changed the whole lot. And people started sharing ideas and helping each other with projects. And that thing I then took with me to my next position, because it helped a lot, and people's personalities come out, their sense of humour comes out, and it was a good way of getting a team to work together, and also getting part of my personality over to them as well.
So you took a big decision for yourself in view of seeing the impact it was having on your mental health, and that description that you gave about jumping from that vine and expecting it to be there, to take a step back from an industry or a job that you did love to do, you really enjoyed, but it seems like the circumstances that industry were providing no longer suited you or anyone. For really, when you look at it from that perspective, it became quite difficult to work in that environment. So you've taken a complete step out from that industry for your own mental health. And even things like being an avid gamer and then not being able to game anymore because you couldn't get that division between what was work and what was enjoyment. Tell me more about the impact of that on your mental health and how you took the strength to make that decision?
Yeah, I think it was more to do with, people. I don't think people understood, like my friends didn't understand that. And, with any mental health, people don't want to talk about it, or they don't want to share that. And I think the people's perception of me was like, oh, it's Lee. He's got this really cool job. He goes from job to job. He's worked on Doctor Who. He's worked with Marianne Sonic. He's now doing Paw Patrol. He's now doing Ghostbusters. It was, and don't get me wrong, I love the industry, and I've been very, very incredibly lucky in what I've done and the games that I've worked on, and the IP that I've worked on. But it was like this thing of like, I wasn't socializing. I wasn't playing games. The games, every day you would hear about layoffs. Every time I went on LinkedIn, it was another company laying off people. And it was like, I need to go back to a different career path. And then I started looking at other jobs, going back to my basic skills of web development, video editing, social media. I became very good with social media. A hobby of mine, an interest of mine, which everybody knows. I'm a huge Prince fan. I built up a big, huge Prince community with a group of friends that we did Prince parties and we did Prince events. And I built up this massive social media profile around this Prince fan community in the UK. And that was a hobby of mine. And I was that was my interest in that was kind of falling by the wayside as well. So it was like, I'll go, I'm very good at that. It was more of a sideline and a project that I was very good at, but I didn't have a job title or any credibility to say, oh, I'm really good with social media. Because obviously it was just a sideline project, and it was like, I got all these huge numbers, and we launched a podcast and everything like that. And it was doing really well. And it was like, but I can't, I think people would mock it on a CV, if that made sense. So I was like, but I'll go back to my skill set. I'll go back to what I know. And then I started looking at other jobs, and I was very lucky that we'll joke, I know we'll laugh, but I found a job with Blue Mountain Media, and obviously the person who runs it is obviously behind the camera, who was very supportive and understood about my career change, and that I was literally turning on a heel of like, I've been doing this for a while, but I'm really good at this, and I think he was very impressed with my CV.
Yes.
So yeah, and the company now, it's been great. And things I've learned from it is, when you're looking at a company, go on things like Glassdoor and see what people are saying about a company. Ask them about their wellness policy, ask them about their mental health policy. That was a big thing after everything I'd been through. Look at what they're offering in terms of, I think me and you had a discussion a couple of months ago about duvet days, that a company was offering duvet days, but obviously it wasn't getting to the problem. It was just like, you can have 2 days off, no questions asked, which I thought was pretty good. And then obviously me and you had that talk about it, and it was like, oh, perhaps it's not actually addressing the issue, which I kind of agreed with you on that. But yeah, so I changed my career path, and I'm incredibly happy now. And I think, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and it's building back that skill set I originally started with. So it's kind of like, I've been all around the world, I've been playing games, and now I'm working for a local company and going back to the basics. It's like, it's almost done in reverse of like starting at a local company and then going big and going around the world. I've kind of, my career paths has kind of done it in reverse. And now I'm like in a local company doing what I'm really good at, what I enjoy. There's very little stress. There's no crunch. There's a priority of what we're working on and everything, but I am enjoying it, and I do feel comfortable there. And you go to, and the other thing to do as well when you're working at a place is look at their board on the thing, and you see, oh, they've gone to Thorpe Park, they've done Christmas parties, and I hadn't seen that before. It's like, it's all policy and stuff, but it's not about what they've done. And obviously the company that I'm working for now, it has all them things. So it's like, it ticks all the boxes, and I feel a lot more positive about myself and my career path.
Good.
Hopefully that answers your question.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
Because, you said in the beginning there, that thing of, oh, your friends are saying, oh, you're traveling the world and you're working on this game and you're doing this and it's all fantastic. And for me, it sort of made me think of like a bit like celebrities, right?
Yeah.
Celebrities always get that, oh, wow, they're so lucky and they're living this life and they're doing this and they're doing that. But it doesn't sound like you were able to come out and say, hold on a minute, it's not all the bells and whistles that you think it is.
Yeah.
Actually, there's so much of this job that drains me, and it did drain you by the sounds of it.
You did.
And there was that inability to come out and say, actually, this isn't good for my mental health.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, all the Olympic stuff I really enjoyed. There was, it was a lot of stress. But then the company I worked for there, they were very, very supportive. I still have a very good relationship with my boss there now. He always phones me out, asks how I'm doing and everything like that. I think it was the follow-up afterwards, and obviously I'd been working in that company for 17, 18 years, and that was all I knew. Olympic rings, a blue hedgehog and an Italian plumber. It was like, what else is there? Right. And then obviously going into the BBC. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed working at the BBC. I liked their culture. They were very supportive and they're very good with mental health. It was just more, and to be brutally honest, it was more about salary there. And obviously there was a question about funding and TV licenses and everything. But they were very good and they were very, very supportive. And again, but there wasn't that many things to work on. It was Doctor Who, Top Gear, Strictly Come Dancing, and then things like Walking with Dinosaurs and working with David Attenborough on all his projects. So it was very limited to what you could do in terms of the games and stuff. So it was like Doctor Who. Oh, and Bluey, but I didn't get a chance to work on Bluey. And obviously Bluey's huge for the BBC. Yeah. But it was more of the freelance and the new technology jobs that I took last year that had the biggest effect. And as I said, that vine swinging and not having that permanent position and not having that security, and also it felt like you was a gun for hire, and you feel like a second-class citizen. So at one company, they would say, oh, we're going to have this like little mini party, but it's only for full-timers. And obviously you're a freelancer, just to let you know that that's what we're doing over there. And that was like, oh, okay, I'll just sit here and work and you guys go party. It was like, oh, okay. And that was, and that was maybe a little thing, but it was like.
Yeah. But how much could that have possibly cost them? A couple of extra drinks
and
a couple of, extra
and it was
sausage
like,
rolls?
They'd have all these meetings, and obviously it was all permanent staff, but they were in this meeting room, and you'd hear them laughing and giggling, and there's just me sitting there going, oh, okay, yeah. So there is that element of like gun for hire and second-class citizen and that freelance experience.
Especially because it sounds like the early part of your career, you didn't experience that. You were a permanent member of a team.
Yeah.
You felt valued. You were part of the team.
Yeah.
And then, you went to the BBC, which was much similar for you. And then you go into the freelance because that's the way the industry went in terms of freelance positions.
And not to sound greedy, but the money was better. And it was like, and that's another reason why a lot of people freelance, because the money's better, but you're giving up a hell of a lot of like, you have to work. If you don't work that day, you don't get paid that day. And it was me just dipping my toe in, but obviously I went in 3 or 4 jobs in and I was like, yeah, probably not a good idea. And anything after that, recruiters or any other people like, oh, there's this freelance position. And I was like, nope, not at all. I wasn't going to do it.
So whilst the money sort of still seems appealing, actually having gone into it, you've seen that actually...
You're giving a lot up for it, and including your mental health, you're giving up a lot for it. So, and like I said, I'm in a permanent position. I feel valued. And the beginning of this year, has been a lot better start for me than like last year was. Last year was just me trying to feel my way around in the dark, and there was a lot going on. So
you mentioned earlier about, almost the stigma attached to opening up about mental health. And, you said about, the industry and people's perception of how working in gaming was fun and exciting. And that really held you back from being able to open up and say, actually, do you know what? I'm finding this quite difficult. And that can be quite consistent with men. Yeah. How do you think men can open up more about their mental health, or just struggling in general? Yeah, so obviously I've struggled
I've had lots of issues in my life that I've struggled with. I've been very lucky. I've got some really close friends, and one of them I've known since I was 5 years old, and now he's a pastor at a church.
Wow.
And I've been very lucky. He doesn't force religion on me, but we've known each other since we were 5. And we don't speak every day, and we don't even speak every month. But when we call each other up, he's been very, very good and giving me advice. But yeah, having that core set of friends. But with me, it's been incredibly important because I've seen other people suffer. I went through a divorce. It was very hard for me then because I was quite young, and even with my friends, they weren't settled down. They didn't have kids. I was, married. I was about to go through a divorce. Had a young son, so I couldn't really relate to them, and obviously they couldn't understand. So that was a big struggle for me. But as I've gone on, and obviously it was tough for me to navigate. But as I've gone on and where I've seen friends go through separation and divorce, I've kind of ended up helping them of like, this is what I went through, this is what you need to do, especially with men and separation from children. And, it can be incredibly difficult. And I've just given, this is what I did. And when me and my son's mother split up, it was incredibly difficult. But it gradually got better. But there was solicitors' letters, there was that fighting to see him. I think it's a lot easier now to see him, to navigate for fathers to see their children. I think back when I went through it, it was very, very hard. It was seemed like the child has to be with its mother, and I was like, okay, and it was, navigating that. But friends have now gone through that, and I've then, I've made it very important to help them and say, you need to do this. I'm here at the other end of a call. If you want to message me, if you want to, I can meet up with you for a coffee. So, men that have struggled with that, I've tried to help out with. And, with social media as well, I'm very good at reading between the lines of like, oh, I think there's something going on with that person. There's something going on with that one. About 6 months ago, it was a friend I used to work with. Hadn't really spoken to him for a while. And I was like, I think he's going through something. And I messaged him and I said, look, I'm here. Give me a call. He gave me a call. We had a really good catch up. He was dealing with something like he'd moved away from his family. He was still with his family and everything, but he changed. Again, he was doing a different career path. He was away from his family, and I spoke to him and we had a really, really good conversation. And I believe I helped him, and I check in on him and just say how you're doing and everything. But men's mental health is incredibly important to me, and I try to help because you've been through it. And the best way to describe it is you've been to the edge of the black hole, you've peered in, so you know what it's like to look into it. So you use that experience to help people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And
sorry, that was a lot.
No. I mean, what you mentioned there, even about like dads and children and access and seeing their children, I find it really frustrating because actually it takes two to tango, right?
Oh yeah, 100.
You can't make a baby without a mum, and you can't make a baby without a dad.
Yeah.
So actually, that's really difficult because, as you said, there is this view that children with the mothers, and maybe it's not so much now.
Yeah.
But as a man, trying to navigate that and this reluctance to open up and reach out to a friend, and as you said, especially for you at a time when you'd maybe gone on a different path.
Yeah, literally, my life had jumped 10 years ahead, and my friends were still dating girls, and I was married and had a very young son at the time.
Yeah. So that's difficult because who do you turn to? And me being the therapist, my head goes, talk to a therapist.
Yeah.
But it's not such a common idea of actually if you're going through that difficulty and you do feel isolated and alone.
Yeah. Again, therapy I didn't even think of therapy at the time. It was more must see my son, must, and I was very, very organised, and I had to get very organised, and don't get me wrong, I think, it's very difficult for mothers and fathers, some fathers just disappear. But I think my perception, and you can feel free to disagree with me, that I think a lot of women now do believe that fathers should have access. And I think I think that perception has definitely changed over the years. But there's, I think there's a lot of people are now dealing with mixed families, and I think that was the other thing that I had to deal with. My son's mother got remarried and had other children. That was, I had to deal with that, and he had like little brothers and sisters, and obviously I said, that's your brother and sister. I didn't say half brother or sister or whatever. And I would go and see him, and they would then want to they wanted to like sit on my lap or anything because I was seeing him, and I was like, I couldn't push him away because that's his brother and sister. It was like, and I kind of, interacted with them, and because I wanted to show him as like, oh no, I'm here for you. That, to make it easier on him. And I made several things though. I made an effort to meet the new partner, and I was very lucky that me and him got on, and he was very reasonable. And when he felt that the mother of my son was being unreasonable, he would sometimes side with me, which I don't think a lot of people would get. No. But that was incredibly important to just almost set in the ground rules of like, I would like to meet him, and then having that conversation of like, I would prefer if he just called me dad. I don't really want you to discipline him. I'd rather his mother discipline him. If there are any concerns, that you phone me. And if there's any joint decisions, that we have them conversations. So me going through that experience is then what I've then told other people that, you may have to deal with mixed families. Yeah. You're going to have to deal with another partner. You may have to deal with other siblings. And I've had other dads say, you've set a good example, And the other thing to talk about, just to bring up, is the overcompensation. A lot of people have said it, and I completely agree that I overcompensated with him when he stayed with me. And I'd be like, hey, I work in the games industry, bring your friends over, I'll bring the and they got to play all the games, and I wanted to be like the cool dad and the popular dad. But yeah, definitely overcompensating. It was like he was a big Godzilla fan. I was like, somehow I managed to get tickets to the premiere. So I was like, hey, I'm a really good dad. I'm taking you to the premiere of the movie. You get to meet all these people. And it was definitely like that element of, there's an element of guilt as well, because you feel guilty because you're not with him all the time. It's like, and with me, I think it's also, my concern with Dylan when he was very young to like becoming an adult, he would blame me for it. And that I was the reason why him and his mum split up. But that was, it was that element of overcompensating. It's like, oh, don't hate me. Yeah. I've made the effort. And I'm not saying, his mum was a bad mother. She's a very good mother to him. But yeah, it was that element of, and I think all dads do it, is they overcompensate of like, because they're weekend dads, and that, that becomes a stereotype in itself of, taking their kids out and going for a meal and everything. But I'm very, very lucky. I have a very good relationship with my son. He's working at the cinema now. He works at the cinema. He's not sure on his career path. He's done a degree in animal management, so he works with lizards and spiders. But he for his degree, he had to do a video and or a website. So he had the option of doing a business plan or a website. And his mum said to him, oh, do the business plan. You need to do the business plan, do the business plan. And he was like, no, I've got dad. And obviously I helped him with the website, helped him with the video, and he got a first in both. So technically I've got I've got a degree in, part of a degree in animal management. But yeah, no, at the moment, he's not sure on what he wants to do for a career, and he's currently working at the cinema. He really enjoys it. But he got like Employee of the Month in January. And now he's training to be a projectionist. They've asked him to look at management training. So yeah, he's now training to be a projectionist. So, I'm really proud of him. And part of me and him and part of our relationship is always going to the cinema. And, I'm very lucky I get free tickets. Not that I had a child just to get free tickets to the cinema, but yeah, and that's part of mine and his, bonding experience of like, he'll phone me up and say, oh, do you want to go see Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan? And I'll be like, yeah, I'll go. So it's, I've been very, very lucky that I have a good relationship with him. And the fact that I did fight for that.
I was just
sorry, that was a lot.
That's really nice for you to be able to share, because I dare say there's a lot of parents that are going through a breakup, and that feeling of guilt, that feeling of overcompensating, those worries that come in of, you know, what questions am I going to have to answer to my child in years to come of, you know, why the breakup happened and am I going to be the one that's going to be responsible? I dare say that all of these things, a lot of, you know, listeners can relate to, but you've almost shown the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah,
that you persevere, you keep turning up, you know, maybe be mindful of the overcompensating. But in the end, if you work at it and if you're there for your child, you're still going to have that strong bond and that good relationship, which you're testimony of.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's always a struggle, but you do have to persist no matter how hard it is. You have to persist, you know, make the effort. Don't say, oh, I can't have him this weekend. You know, my advice to parents that are in these situations, have like a Google Calendar, make sure that you let the other parent know of future dates and give them as much notice as you can. You know, agree, you know, have alternative Christmases and make sure they're, you know, it's agreed in advance. Go to things like Relate, you know, Relate if there are still issues going around. But yeah, constantly be there. I think it's, you know, it's very hard for fathers, but you know, if you're not seeing your child, still buy the birthday card, make a journal, make a calendar, you know, write down your thoughts of like, you know, so that if at the end of the tunnel, you know, they come and see you or they find you, if you're away from them, that you have, you know, this is what I went through and, you know, this is the struggle that I've gone through. So there's that element to it. But with Dylan, it was very hard, but now it's a lot easier. And like you said, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you so much, Lee, for joining us today and sharing your story. If our listeners would like to learn more about Lee, you can check out his work on his website and we'll tag him in the episode details. To all our listeners and viewers, we truly appreciate you. Please leave your thoughts on the episode in the comments and don't forget to like, subscribe and share if you enjoyed it. This is the Silent Epidemic. We'll see you next time.